Michael Mick Carter was a failed cameraman who roamed the suburbs of Los Angeles, California, carrying his old handheld camera. Tall, thin, and almost always unshaven, Mick dreamed of one day working for major TV studios or covering important events. But his last few years had been a series of frustrations and sporadic gigs, such as filming birthday parties or participating in small, independent productions that never went anywhere. Just when he thought things couldn't get worse, his car broke down and he had to sell the only professional lens he owned to pay for the repair. One night, while drinking a late-night coffee at a roadside diner, Mick watched the local news on CMM, a network known for sensationalist reports and shocking accident footage. That's when he noticed something. Reporters always mentioned exclusive footage obtained by an amateur cameraman in disaster situations. Fires, hit and runs, landslides. He saw how these videos made headlines and, consequently, brought payment to the videographers. A light bulb went off in Mick's mind. Maybe if he was in the right place at the right time to film disasters, he could finally make some real money. The beginning was discreet and, in a way, even innocent. Mick started frequenting areas known for frequent accidents, such as dangerous intersections and winding roads. He listened to the police radio, waiting for news of crashes or minor collisions, arriving at the scenes even before emergency crews. He sold the footage to CMM, and the network paid well for shocking content. The audience loved fresh tragedy, and Mick quickly realized this was his big chance. However, competition in this field existed as well. Other nightcrawlers were doing the same thing, trying to be the first to arrive where chaos struck. To stand out, Mick began thinking of ways to facilitate disasters. At first, it was something small. He would park his car in a way that partially blocked an intersection, forcing drivers to brake suddenly or attempt risky maneuvers. He recorded the results on his camera and sold the footage the same day. The adrenaline rush of seeing the news aired on TV, along with the money he received, made him feel powerful. Enchanted by the exclusive footage, CMM began relying on Mick for even more sensationalist stories. In no time, he had built a clandestine reputation as the guy who's always there when things go wrong. On a night full of accidents, he could earn more than in months of honest work. This new lifestyle sparked a pulse of ambition in his chest. If he could create the perfect conditions for chaos himself, why not maximize it? That's when Mick made his first openly criminal decision. He loosened the bolts of a road sign so that it would turn slightly. At night, drivers wouldn't notice that the detour sign was pointing in the wrong direction, leading to sudden braking and crashes. He filmed everything from just a few meters away, without helping the victims, without hesitating. His cold gaze was that of someone who understood that every second of violence would bring in good money. Of course, CMM bought the footage. An unexpected tragedy on the highway, the anchors reported. Mick's heart pounded, torn between the thrill of making big money and the dark realization that he was now an accomplice to serious injuries. However, guilt quickly faded when the money hit his bank account. It was just a little push toward the inevitable, he told himself. From then on, Mick's spiral of manipulations only grew. Determined to rise and solidify his name in local TV, he moved from staged accidents to increasingly dangerous and cruel acts, all in the name of capturing the perfect video that would shock audiences and make him rich. Mick Carter's success in supplying shocking footage to CMM began attracting the attention of editors, producers, and even rivals in the sensationalist news market. Within months, he had left his beat-up car behind and invested in a van equipped with police frequency scanners, a top-of-the-line laptop, and several high-definition cameras. Now he could respond immediately to emergencies reported on the police radio, securing first-hand footage. To manage all the logistics, Mick hired an assistant, Jared O'Neill, an ambitious young man who, though unaware of Mick's questionable methods at first, enjoyed the adrenaline and quick profits that the job provided. Jared received a fixed salary plus a bonus for each video sold. Enthralled, he didn't ask too many questions about how Mick always managed to be in the right place to capture disasters. He simply believed it was luck and good police connections. Their relationship strengthened when Mick gradually shared some of his tactics for inducing minor accidents. Jared was shocked at first, but soon gave in to greed, realizing that for every controversial video, CMM paid hefty sums. In a busy week, they could earn double or triple what many full-time reporters made. The editors at CMM never suspected, or perhaps preferred not to know, that Mick was causing some of the incidents he filmed. To them, the fact that the footage was real and shocking was enough. Ratings soared, advertisers filled the network's coffers, and everyone profited. But Mick wanted more. The thrill of deceiving the system and manipulating tragedies had become almost an addiction. He went from turning road signs and causing minor crashes to more elaborate strategies, like leaving oil on the road in dangerous curves or breaking fire hydrants to flood sections of highways. There was even an occasion when a truck lost control and overturned, spilling flammable cargo across the road. Mick recorded the flames and chaos, selling the devastating footage to CMM. It made headlines all day long, and the check he received was big enough for him to move to a loft in the city center. Jared, still torn between excitement and a slight moral discomfort, began to realize that Mick didn't care in the slightest about the consequences of his actions. While paramedics rescued injured drivers, Mick thrilled at the quality of the footage he had captured. One night, after filming a multi-victim accident, Jared locked himself in the van's bathroom and vomited, shocked by the brutality he had witnessed. When he returned, Mick was smiling, satisfied with the scoop they had secured. As the months passed, Mick's reputation at CMM grew to such an extent that he gained direct contact with news directors, even receiving invitations to interview public figures and local politicians about road safety, a grim irony, considering that many of the disasters had his hand behind them. He was no longer just submitting footage for the news but was actively involved in the editing process, selecting the most shocking angles, the bloodiest scenes, and the moments of greatest despair for the victims. Meanwhile, Mick harbored a more ambitious goal. He wanted to enter the network officially as a special correspondent, and perhaps take on a leadership position in the future. The amount of money he generated along with his skill in capturing or creating bombastic tragedies made him a valuable asset. CMM courted him, but there was an internal path to follow. And for Mick, each step required even more exceptional footage. If that meant increasing risks and pushing moral boundaries, he would do it without hesitation. Little did Mick know that, as he climbed the TV hierarchy and got richer, he was also drawing the attention of other, more discreet entities. In dimly lit rooms filled with files, some people began to question the sudden surge of so many strangely timely accidents. And when federal agents get a whiff of something suspicious, not even the biggest name in the news can stop a full-scale investigation. What the cameraman didn't realize was that the FBI was already watching him closely. Mick Carter's schedule was increasingly filled with commitments to CMM, which now officially hired him as a special street correspondent. He roamed the late nights of Los Angeles and neighboring regions in his van full of equipment, always accompanied by Jared, his loyal assistant, covering emergencies, police chases, and disasters in real time. In turn, Mick's criminal actions escalated to a darker level. He was no longer satisfied with causing occasional collisions. He began orchestrating extreme danger scenarios, mainly in places where the chances of survival were low, because, in the logic of sensationalist news, tragic deaths made bigger headlines and had a greater impact. One of his favorite methods was spilling oil on the asphalt, especially at sharp curves that became deadly if a driver passed at high speed. Worse still was when Mick decided to sabotage a concrete barrier at the edge of a cliff, creating a gap so that cars skidding out of control would plunge into the abyss. With each great tragedy filmed, CMM rewarded Mick with more contracts and promises of advancement within the network. Scene 4. Jared's breaking point. Slowly, Jared realized this was no longer just casual transgression. They were now deliberately causing homicides.
On a cold night, on a road that ran along a famous canyon, Mick ordered Jared to help him spread oil on a dangerous curve.
The assistant hesitated, arguing that people could die, but Mick was ruthless.
Do you want to keep making this kind of money? Do you want to stay on my team? Or are you walking away like a coward?
He barked, pointing to the van full of cameras.
Either you're in or you're out.
Driven by fear of losing his job and by the greed that had already consumed him, Jared obeyed in silence. That night, 2 cars lost control and plunged off the cliff, creating one of the most shocking scenes Mick had ever filmed. The video went viral on CMM's morning broadcast, and just weeks later, Mick was invited to take a leadership role in the network's investigative journalism division. By this point, Mick was living in a luxurious condominium, driving a state-of-the-art SUV, and was far removed from the financial uncertainty of his past. He prided himself on being recognized in newsrooms as the man of exclusive footage. The outside world saw him as an exemplary professional, someone who could arrive at disaster scenes in record time. Meanwhile, Jared struggled to silence his growing guilt. Their partnership had become an unspoken pact. Whoever broke the silence might not survive the consequences. However, no one is untouchable forever. The FBI, whose agents were analyzing suspicious incidents on Los Angeles roads and streets, found statistical patterns of collisions occurring systematically in areas covered by Mick. Even more intriguing, the cameraman was always present at events that, by sheer probability, shouldn't have happened so frequently. Tracing Mick's history, the agents discovered his sudden wealth, his change in lifestyle, and some suspicious purchases, such as large quantities of automotive oil bought from specialized suppliers. It didn't take long for the FBI to start tracking Mick and Jared's every move without them realizing it. The initial focus was to confirm whether the accidents involved criminal intent. Then, they suspected something even worse, premeditated homicides, all to generate shocking news stories. To make the investigation harder, Mick maintained a flawless public image as a brave and dedicated journalist, making donations to charities and attending fundraising events, certainly to cover his macabre actions and divert any suspicion. But every news scoop Mick landed came with more evidence for the investigators. Tire marks at the scene where he arrived first, the lack of emergency alerts before certain incidents, witnesses who reported seeing a suspicious van circling the area. The noose was tightening. The FBI just needed irrefutable proof before making their move, knowing that a man as cunning as Mick could escape, or even react violently, if he realized he was being targeted. With his growing influence at CMM, Mick Carter finally took on the role of Deputy Director of Investigative Journalism. He boasted in front of colleagues, flaunted his knowledge of tragedies, and often led field reporting teams. Most of his income now came from astronomical bonuses for exclusive coverage of disasters that he himself had orchestrated. In meetings with executives, he exuded charisma and appeared to be the most dedicated professional at the network. No one suspected how much blood he had on his hands, or if they did, they preferred not to investigate too deeply. However, the FBI had already compiled an extensive dossier on Mick traffic camera recordings, capturing him parking in suspicious locations just before accidents, purchased records of large amounts of lubricating oil and testimony from mechanics who had seen him ordering parts that could disable vehicle brakes. The investigative team had also secured anonymous testimony from Jared, who, in a moment of desperation, hid a flash drive with a relative containing never-before-released footage of Mick savoring scenes of carnage. Prepared for the grand operation, FBI agents monitored Mick's communications, waiting for a slip-up or another criminal move. And it came on a rainy night when the cameraman planned to close his coverage with a flourish. He orchestrated a major disaster involving a tour bus. manipulating detour signs to lead the vehicle onto a flooded and debris-filled stretch of road. Mick and Jared positioned themselves to film everything, but before they could begin, sirens tore through the darkness. Federal vehicles appeared, armed agents advanced, and floodlights illuminated Mick's stunned face.
Michael Carter, hands on your head. You are under arrest on suspicion of multiple homicides, conspiracy, and organized crime.
Shouted the operations leader. Shocked, Mick dropped his camera. He tried to resist but was quickly subdued by the officers. Jared was also handcuffed, though he was in a state of disbelief over everything happening. As he was dragged into a patrol car, Mick screamed,
"You can't do this, I'm an important name at CMM."
Months passed in a whirlwind of investigations and testimonies. The case against Mick was undeniably solid. The prosecution gathered evidence proving that he had caused dozens of crashes, resulting in countless deaths. Leaked videos shocked the nation. Footage of Mick and Jared laughing while capturing images of victims in agony. The trial was broadcast by major networks, including CMM itself, now desperate to distance itself from the man who was once its disaster journalism star. The verdict was indisputable: guilty of premeditated murder, endangering public safety, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and a slew of other charges. In her final statement, the judge deemed Mick Carter's orchestrated deaths so cruel that she sentenced him to capital punishment, as permitted by the laws of the state where the crimes were prosecuted. A wave of public outrage sealed the fate of the former cameraman. At that fateful moment, upon hearing his death sentence, Mick lowered his head. No excitement, no cameras to glorify his exploits. Only the pathetic figure of a man consumed by greed, who had forsaken all humanity in pursuit of fame and fortune. After the trial, Jared struck a plea deal to reduce his own sentence, but still received several years in prison. As Mick was escorted by police to the maximum security penitentiary, cameras from various networks documented the tragic downfall of a man who had once used the suffering of others as a stepping stone to success. Now, he was just another defeated face, destined to be forgotten in criminal archives. The only news report featuring him was his own, an extended coverage of the darkest paths unchecked ambition can take, and the fatal price it exacts in the end.